Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
All right, yeah. So Ben, if you could maybe share with our audience, because I know there's those on here that may not understand co-benefits, or maybe have heard the term but don't really understand the breadth of what co-benefits means. And maybe you could share from your perspective some of those co-benefits and what you're seeing.
The co-benefits are rapidly coming into this conversation. They've always been there, but now more groups are picking up this concept of co-benefits coming with a carbon claim. And I can tell you specifically the co-benefits we focus on at Merge are, we're looking at soil components. So soil health, soil water, soil carbon as kind of the core driver of that we're seeing coming into these markets, right? Like nutrient density is going to hang on to soil health and probably eventually find its way into a soil carbon scheme. What we are focused on is co-benefits that are around biodiversity, for one. Like, we're big on biodiversity. The other co-benefit of water would be the next most popular co-benefit. And I would say water is really, like, we lead with biodiversity as a company, but water is more popular than biodiversity right now by far. Most of our projects that we're doing are creating a water co-benefit to go along with a carbon claim. There's all sorts of co-benefits, though, like an organic certification is a co-benefit. Participating in a local ecosystem project is a co-benefit. Participating or creating nutrient density data behind your farming practices is a co-benefit that you can hook into these claims. And it's really what it comes down to is just telling the right story from what's actually happening. And if I, as a farmer, just go sell a carbon ton because I no-till and cover crop my acres, I'm doing that for me in my agronomy program primarily.
Yeah.
It doesn't create a great story for local agriculture, really, because it doesn't prove anything is really happening. And there's probably a carbon claim on there that's maybe legitimate, maybe not. But when we start talking to people about how we're changing downstream water, how we are changing local access to nature and biodiversity, how we are impacting the nutritional quality of products by doing these things, we can hang all the market mechanisms on carbon as long as we tell the whole story behind what's happening with that carbon activity. And they don't happen in a vacuum, right? Like, carbon sequestration doesn't just happen. Like, these co-benefits are happening in parallel, or precursors to carbon happening. And we're just kind of saying, oh, those are great, but this is the thing that's going to make us money. And that's just, it's not what we're going to see in the future. We are going to see a carbon program come in and say, we're going to use this as our little unit is going to be the carbon, but it doesn't qualify to be a unit unless it has this data stream attached to it. And that's going to be co-benefit data that will need to come with these projects.
Yeah, I'm certainly hearing that conversation happen quite readily, actually, from the buyer market, which is the carbon unit is really going to be the portfolio that gets opened up, and it won't be qualified unless water in particular, as you mentioned, is part of that. But even the ones that you mentioned that people don't think about, which are social impact components. So you talked about SNAP, and those that potentially have a bit of a food fragility system in your neck of the woods there in your county. What's happening at the farm fields in the buyers incentivizing this? There's co-benefit connectivity when we start thinking about the social impact, I'll call it for simplicity's sake, connectivity that we can have for that region. And I think that is something we overlook drastically, and something I talk about, as you know, at Grow, when we're talking about our Nourish Mart, is just bringing farmers and consumers closer together so that we can try to create more food resilient hubs in certain regions. But I think an important conversation is these projects that are happening, right at the farm gate, the buyers, whatever that may look like, inset or offset, need to take into account some of that social impact that's happening right around where those projects are stimulated.
Absolutely. And taking it back to the beginning of our chat here, what I'm most impressed with coming out of this industry right now is I am realizing as we just put out more and more feelers for going to get work, I can't believe how many programs are going on right now that are local to regional type of conservation programs that are coming out of, little NGOs and just groups here and there that are trying to launch local first projects that present so much opportunity to just like take this project, take this project, take this project, take this project. And now you have a regional ecosystem you've just put together that is all, it might be 4 or 5 different projects, but it's in it's in an area that all works together, and you have projects working with projects. And that there's so much opportunity to connect the good things that are happening out there between these little initiatives. And it's like there's a school of food here in Illinois. If we just talk Illinois things for a second,
Yeah.
we're just talking things we're doing for a second around this area. So we have a program in Dane County, Wisconsin that we're launching. That is it started out as a migration corridors program to remove the fragmentation in the Dane County migration system, right, as a starting point, but it rapidly evolved into a water quality opportunity, right? It was just like, oh, that's a great mission to be on for biodiversity, but what's going to pay is water and then carbon, and that, especially in that region. But then how we're going to go attack that project is using the exact same strategy that we're going to go attack the Illinois School of Foods Innovation Lab with, right? So we want to go at Illinois farmers the same way we're going at Wisconsin farmers. And it really comes down to landscape management. It's about putting different crops on acres that better service the farm and the downstream. And then those crops just happen to have a local use. So it helps kickstart this local food system regeneration or rejuvenation, and saying, hey, we can put this crop here and it manages ecosystem better, but then we can harvest it and we can bring it into our local food system, and it's higher nutrition. It's, holds water. It helps with cleaning our water as it comes into our wellhead and those kinds of things. It's just, we call it stacking values, but it's just, there's so many different opportunities out there for these programs to come together and work on without making it too complex.
And I think you and I mean, we know we understand the mechanisms that need to change. And I always talk about rehabilitation, then rejuvenation, and then regeneration. Regeneration is the end state, but we have to cover the first two. And I talk about rehabilitation because in a lot of cases, if you're corn, soybean, any of the major commodity crops, and you're double cropping them, even like soybean, if you're double crop, we got to rehabilitate the soils in that ecosystem before we even start rejuvenating it. But that conversation at the producer, and I haven't met one producer that isn't interested. It's just, how do they make that stepping stone? Because a lot of them are constrained, probably in your county, you're seeing this as well, just by the debt financing systems that are out there. And so the crediting system isn't really working because too much is being lost in the messy middle, let's just call it. And so what else is out there for them to take that small step forward, even to keep farming your commodity crops, but then start introducing the local regional crops that could be tagged on as a companion plant, or it could be just a secondary plant, depending on the seasonality and where you're at, where we can really start to see the impacts locally and yet still service this global or national requirement that we're caught in.
Yeah. Yeah. I started trying to farm alternative grains on our farm as a way to do that, right? Break into this new market opportunity and try and do something local. And there's no infrastructure locally to do anything. So there are some hurdles to making these steps. We've worked a lot with Kernza over the past couple of years, the intermediate wheatgrass grain, right? And
so let's talk about that. I've had a few conversations. And I'd love for you to tell the audience what Kernza as an alternative grain really, where it came from, the sort of that origin, because I know you have a lot of knowledge on it.
Not that much, but I have a lot of knowledge over what's happening with Kernza and where it's been and where it's going for sure.
Great.
Yeah. It's intermediate wheatgrass is what Kernza is the grain that's been, I think they're on generation, I don't know, I would say it wrong, at the Land Institute, probably in the 40s, a generation. It's way up there. I think they have, production-wise, they're on like their 15th generation out right now that's production ready, something like that. But so the Land Institute has been working with intermediate wheatgrass to breed it to grow grain and more grain. So that is what Kernza is the grain from intermediate wheatgrass. And intermediate wheatgrass is a deep-rooted prairie plant that is a perennial. Well, it's a perennial in some cases when it's properly managed. It's just a multi-year crop in other cases where it's not properly managed. But let's just say a 5-year average. So plant a seed in year 0 and you harvest that seed every year until year 5, 6. We have one field that's on year 11 in our network. So it really comes down to how it's managed and what kind of opportunity. It's no different than any other crop. You give it good opportunity, it does good things for you. So what we've done to help out Kernza is really what makes Kernza unique is its impact on the environment as a food source. There's been a ton of investment in the infrastructure and the innovation behind Kernza as a food product. So you can turn Kernza into anything grain-based that you want to turn Kernza into. You can even turn it into recycled servingware and things like that.
It's got biophilic capabilities.
It does, yeah. They're using it to make some packaging and like the hull and the brand to make packaging and not reusable, but compostable bowls and things like that. So yeah, there's interesting innovations happening behind it. But what's most successful with Kernza is its penetration into the brewing and baking world, right? It's a higher protein product, a higher fiber product. It has a lot of different flavor, but not throwing off your mixes, but it has a lot of different flavor because of how deeply rooted it is. And it has a completely different mineral compound because of the fact that it goes deep into that soil profile. It dramatically reduces the emissions of anything it goes into because of its ability to sequester carbon. All right. So the pull on Kernza, Kernza is rapidly growing right now as an ingredient in these supply chains because of its impact on carbon intensity when it comes into a supply chain. But the data everyone wants is what else is happening with it. So it's another great example of here's a grain that has a verified carbon outcome. But what's really fascinating about the grain is its impact on water systems and nesting habitat for birds in the plains, right? And that it's a very interesting story of a grain and how it impacts the ecosystem and isn't just wheat that we're throwing into a massive supply chain and creating a generic product. So it's really taking off. It's going overseas now. Looking at going into some really big supply chains. Great. So we are working on helping tell the data story and prove the science behind it. So as we pick these up outside the United States, there's legitimacy to the science. But Kernza is it's a fascinating case study on what's achievable with local food systems. Because if you go where Kernza is grown, somebody is using it locally all the time. There's always a baker in the next community down that is using Kernza in that product because it tells a different story about what it can do to that local environment, and people want that. Right?
Yeah.
Like Salina, Kansas, where this all comes out of, is fascinating because you go to Salina and almost every food and beverage business in Salina is using Kernza to some degree in their menu. I don't know if that's still as saturated as it was a couple years ago, but it's just a crop that has taken a local first approach and is now a global, I don't want to call it a commodity, but it's has global ingredient potential. So
it's very interesting. Have you seen it being used for livestock, given some of the, in a forage? I mean, perennial crops as a forage for livestock is really starting to take off with different grazing management systems. What's your take? Have you seen anything happen with Kernza and some of those mixes?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of grazing happening on Kernza, and
is it leafy mass that they're eating? How does it?
Yeah, so it's early vegetative growth grazing. It's not grazing mature crop.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of farmers that graze Kernza as a grazing crop, just in the mix of their grazing mix. And then it also offers the potential after grazing season to come in and harvest the grain off of that Kernza, right? If you know, it's very similar to how you would take wheat on the hoof for
Yeah.
some bred heifers in early spring or something like that in these areas. Yeah. Right? So very similar practices can be applied to the same thing. The placement of Kernza is what we've been focused on, right? Because you can't take some of these alternative grains, you can't just go, oh, we're going to get rid of wheat.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So what we've done with Kernza is said, look, Kernza solves problems with water better than it does anything else, right? It deep roots, cleans water systems. People are putting it around wellheads in cities because it's cleaning up well waters for cities because they're
reclamation
surrounding it with deep-rooted Kernza systems.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's been fascinating what it's been used for. But what we've done is try to really enhance the application of crops like Kernza into these systems that solve multiple problems for us, and they're more permanent systems. So it increases the integrity of the claims that can be made coming from these systems too. It's just, it's saying here's a permanent crop on a buffer system that is wide enough it makes sense to manage it for harvest. It's not just a 30-foot strip. It's like 130 foot or 120 foot strip or something like that of Kernza that dramatically improves downstream water quality and also gives that farmer a legitimate carbon sequestration claim, right? It's not no-till and cover crop. This is a permanent, deep-rooted biomass generating system. There's proven carbon sequestration benefits to it that are verifiable, measurable. So it's turned into like one of the only legitimate things you can do in the carbon space that we've come across is plant these perennial systems. It's just multi-benefit kind of a crop. So,
and I'm sure we could go on and talk about some of the wild perennial pace that's really starting to hit our fields. I'd like to make some hay while the sun's out and sort of turn the attention to some of the other things that we get into, and one of that would be geospatial technology and how that is really coming, particularly with AI, coming in like a floodgate kind of a wave or a tsunami into our world, both on those claims and the projects that we're talking about, but even in the designing of new systems when we're thinking about how do we support farmers just making those steps, and it really starts with the design element. I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much is changing so fast in that space, right? John on our team and I used to do all of our own logic behind nitrogen management, seed management when I was a technical agronomist, and John was our, on the GIS side of things. And what we used to do in GIS 10 years ago is just like, take us 2 days to do a nitrogen script, right? And now it's 2.5 seconds or something crazy like that to do the same work, and not even having the data there, right? Just using what AI enables from a data processing and information processing standpoint. It's able to create prescriptions and do almost anything you want it to do. I think there's always an analog needed. That information isn't any good without data that provides some truth, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying more data from R&D. I'm saying as AI gets even more, AI is not going to go away in how it's being used, and it especially isn't going to go away in how agriculture is using it, because we have a knack for easy routes and ag. But the only thing that's going to make that AI valuable is ground level data, right? And I think that's where we have a ton of power as producers, is the fact that you're doing real things, like hands-on, you're touching grass every day, and you're creating information as you do that. And that information has so much value to a lot of different areas, but that's one that can't function without real truth data coming into it. And I do think there's a massive opportunity for agriculture, producers in agriculture, to aggregate around that and say, these things don't work unless we give you the reality of what's actually happening when we do actions at farm level and ranch level.
I love it.
Yeah, so I think there's some fascinating opportunities coming in that.
So, and thanks for lobbing me a softball on that one. Where does blockchain come into that?
Oh, I think it's for that whole experience, you have to have data integrity, and you have to be able to trace that data back to, you have to be able to trace that integrity back to where the data is originating, right? And that's really, when it comes down to the movement of the data, everything about that data is going to be chain of custody information. So who had the spreadsheet that made that data? What soil lab did that come from?
Right.
Has the spreadsheet been altered? Is the farmer participating in 4 programs on this acre because they signed up for 4 biological seed treatments this year? Those kinds of pieces of information are the problems that blockchain solves for a lot of these, different avenues we can go down with this work. But it really comes down to the integrity and authenticity of that data and our ability to really, if we need to go back and come at a claim, there's a different level of defensibility when it comes to a blockchain system than if it's just sitting on our platform. Like Merge has agreed to be open and transparent, but at the end of the day, we aren't on a network other than our own. So you just rely on us being truthful and great, right? So if you want to get into the world of truly high integrity and truly authentic data, that has to happen through a blockchain platform. Otherwise, you're just relying on the trust of people with a company like me to tell you that the data is legitimate and we haven't touched it. Right?
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you vocalizing that. You have some experience with blockchain, though, prior to us. So first, for our audience, Merge and Grow is starting to work together. So Merge is going to be starting to use the Grow blockchain and in some of the work and upcoming work that we have collaboratively together. So that's really exciting. I'm super stoked about that. But you have some experience with blockchain from a number of years ago, actually. I mean, I always say that, Grow hasn't we haven't invented anything. We've just reinvented how we use that wheel more effectively, specifically for the agri-food sector. Blockchain's been around for a long, long time. And, we just now are figuring out the levers to pull that are really creating that beneficial movement within the agri-food sector. But yeah, please share some of your experience with where you come from on blockchain there.
I mean, it's brief, but it's very intentional, right? When we started our company 5 years ago, we started out as a blockchain-backed platform, right? And we had a blockchain partner, and we've minted the first carbon baselines on chain back, in 2020. A lot of things we didn't really talk about yet, but the reason we went there were reasons for integrity and also the decentralization of this. I'm a big believer in open source, right? Especially if it's publicly funded evolution of a product. But there's so much, and this kind of goes for food, but I don't want to get into the equality discussion on it, but it really does come down to like access to equal opportunities to, participate, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of it for us, is just that access to opportunity to participate. But also, the reason we were there in the beginning was the integrity of the data. Why that changed for us in the middle, right? I'm not afraid to talk about the fact that we also left blockchain and now we're coming back to it, but we didn't know what data needed to be on chain. We didn't know what was the important pieces of data. So where we put our investments and energy is to say, all right, the markets are a mess on all this. We don't know what the markets will decide is the thing, but what we need to do is go figure out the fundamental data packages behind what we believed were the categories of data that were going to drive the value in the market, which were carbon, biodiversity, water, nutrition, community. Maybe there's an organic thing there at some point. We had to figure out what data we were going to put on blockchain. We couldn't just talk about being on blockchain and have no ability to execute a data collection activity or data structuring or architecture thing, right? So we had to figure all that out. We had to figure out how to align that with the market. And now we finally come back to like, oh, now it's time, because we're going to start putting data packages out into the world and seeing what's happening with them. Now is the time for all of this to be on-chain activity. It's time to, break through and get into some of the market mechanisms that we can use blockchain to achieve, that maybe the space is ready for those types of advancements. I think it's the activity in general.
You hit it really well in terms of timing. I mean, I think everyone in business that's an entrepreneur or being in some sort of executive role is aware that timing has a lot to do with the success or the adoption of emerging technologies into any market space. And I think there's never been a better time than today to see Web3 integrate into a agri-food market space. And that's blockchain and everything included comes along with that, the tools, the decentralization, the definance, the decentralized finance piece, the DeFi. All of these are just components of the larger Web3 umbrella that's really the emerging technology that's starting to saddle up beside the agri-food market. There's an ask from the value chain. There's an ask from consumers. I think producers are innovative and they're open to how do we use this new platform effectively. And I've loved what you've mentioned, because it rings true for me almost daily, that if we can show producers how they can have a seat at the table in these discussions for change, and whether that is the financial diversification of their balance sheets, whether that is the data that they're procuring so that the rest of this industry can continue to be innovative, and whether that's geospatial or otherwise, they're pretty keen, but we need to get them at the table. And I think that's been a missing link for so long. It's dictation to producers. And there's always these, we go talk to them in the Kernza. We have these, that's not having them at the table. That's not engaging them. That's asking them questions, collecting a bunch of information, and then going to make decisions without their involvement in how that data is actually being aggregated and used and processed. But they need to be sitting there. They need to be not only indicating to us that these yield maps don't make sense to us and they have no relevance, but this data over here really does, and this is going to move the needle and how we continue to move towards agri-conservation. And we'll start weeding out the wonderful platforms that are out there, those that are actually moving the needle, and those that are just look fancy and probably have great coding behind it, but they don't move the needle, and we really just need to identify that. So I'm really, really excited about all of that, and super jazzed that you have some of that background knowledge, and I like that you took the time to figure it out. Grow as Grow launched, we've launched a lot of applications onto our blockchain, and we've really just taken the time to slow down and not bring on too many projects using these applications, so that we can build really good use cases, because we wanted to, kind of like you, really understand what was needed, what wasn't, what was the those that were reviewing the data, what were they saying? Is it relevant to them? Was it not relevant to them? And then that secondary layer, and I really look at you as like an Oracle component. How do we get these data packs more streamlined and positioned so that they can just ride on the ledger on the blockchain effectively? We already know, those that need to see the information, what needs to be there and the relevancy behind that. So really, really exciting times. We're getting towards the end. I've probably talked a little more than I should have. But the opportunity to share more about Merge Impact with our audience, I'd love to give you the floor here, Ben. I'd love to have you share any upcoming updates. Where can they find you, first of all? Are there events that you're going to be at in the coming weeks here? And please point them in the right direction if they want to reach out and have a discussion with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the time for that. So you can find you can find myself on LinkedIn. You can find our company Merge Impact on LinkedIn. You can find our Instagram at Planet Portfolio, which we didn't really dive into today, but there's, that is our, getting into the consumer world with us. So Planet Portfolio is just doing what Instagram does. We educate on flora and fauna on a weekly basis. We attach some of that to brands we work with and do some co-branding there. But for the most part, education on wildlife and insects and all the things that make our farms great. Those are the primary social outlets for us. Otherwise, you can go to www.mergeimpact.com. You can see a short, although dated, but short demo of our platform. So you can see kind of, Neil, like what you were saying is we are workhorses. Like we put in the time into the functional activities of our platform. It's not flashy. It's highly functional, works for what we say we do, and it does what we say we do. So, as far as what we do, there's a lot, right? And you're learning that getting in these projects with us is that we aren't just a software that takes in data. We are experts in the field. So we help build projects. We help navigate the complexities of these projects using the technology on the back end to simplify that process as we're coming into it. But it really comes down to your sustainability as an operation or as a brand or whatever it may be. If you have a sustainability project or sustainability goals, there's specific data that has to come from the farm if you really want those goals to be achieved and you want those programs to have some level of success. So what we do is come in and we connect those data streams. We connect financial flows that can complement those projects if those are in place locally and regionally. And we just bring more value to that project in general by trying to bring more revenue to the farmer to do the good ecosystem things we want them to do. And at the end of the day, just package that data up nicely and communicate it to whoever it needs to be communicated to, so we can continue to grow this regenerative effort or whatever we want to call this thing we're doing here to make it better. We want to grow it, and we don't really care how it grows. Our goal as a company is to put more conservation acres into agriculture. We're a software company, so we're doing a lot of work to get that to happen. And at the end of the day, our system, the nice little software we've put so much emphasis and energy into, makes everything easy to see, right? So you want to report over here, you want to report over there, click a button, get your report. Behind that, there's a massive amount of work that goes into us structuring data streams, ensuring that you get the data you need on chain, ensuring that the farmer gets the data they need, the insurance agent gets what they need, and the food processor down the stream turning grain into a flour gets what they need, or brewer, or whatever it would be. So we talked about all that co-benefit stuff. That's the data, the carbon data, all that. But we're doing a lot of stuff with data, and on behalf of the farmers, right?
Yeah.
Everything we do, the revenue goes back to the farmer. We take our little bit out of it, but we're all at some point from the farm side of this. We really feel that the farmers have the ownership in this. Putting these natural assets on your balance sheet, we didn't talk about today either, but like another big opportunity with what you're doing and what we're doing you create all this data from all these good things. Is the market mature enough for what you've done yet? We don't know. So if you just want to put them on your balance sheet, this is how you put them on your balance sheet. Right?
So first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. I really am encouraged by what you're doing. And I've been a big fan and a big supporter of, the process that you've rolled out and, to where you've got today. And just really chuffed that we have the opportunity to come together and now, coalesce the things that we're synergistically aligned on. The opportunity for both of us who are farmers, really to continue to be additive back to the farmers, I think is so important. So for our audience, that is one of the driving core values between Merge and Buy and Grow, which is we need to be additive to the agriculture industry. And so, farmers that are out there that are looking for some of that balance sheet diversification. So Ben mentioned, how do we get natural assets onto balance sheet? Between Ben and I, we can really help support how you look at your balance sheet in a different way and how these data flows can actually be additive and even potentially start decreasing the need for your LOC extensions, removing you a little bit from that debt financing process that, you're the cogwheel that we're caught in as farmers on a regular basis. And that really starts to provide a little more hope and a little more opportunity in the eyes of producers. I know those that we've impacted thus far, and I'm sure as we continue to move forward, Ben, we're going to start to see a lot more head and heart come into this, because every time I think we start playing around with that diversification of balance sheet, we start to provide hope, and that hope translates into momentum. And I really think that is the Renaissance movement that we're creating, at Grow, and then, the mission that Emergent Impact brings.
Yeah, we really love what you're doing over there too, Neil. And I think that's where, when we look at how we are working together, and this is what's been kind of lacked from this in the past, is like there has been a lack of collaboration in this space because of the uncertainty in this space, right? It's like who's coming out of this, what you're working on over there, like you said, is in such alignment with what we're working on over here. We appreciate everything that y'all are doing over there to grow this mission, and we're just happy to be a part of it. This is a great experience for us.
It's amazing. Maybe as we wrap up, we can give a head nod to somebody in your county there. Maybe there's a food manufacturer, or a farmer's market you can talk to, for any one of our audience that happens to be in the Illinois area, listening, or traveling to that area. And I know in the Grow Network we have some community members based just outside of Chicago, I believe, Naperville or Naperville. I always say it wrong. Nonetheless, if you would like to give a bit of a head nod to something happening in that food community and support that, I'd be good.
Yeah, we're in Morrison, Illinois, so straight opposite side of the state of the Chicagoland. There's not a lot happening out here. Like I said, it's a lot of corn, soy, and a lot of challenging areas. But what we've done is we've brought one of our brands out here to use a facility to bag and create finished product in.
Okay.
What that's going to do is then open up the awareness that sits behind that product that says, oh, here's a different grain. And then the next step is we're bringing that grain into these local projects to where we're going to work on municipal water systems locally with additions of acres of this grain, and then we'll move that grain into these local supply chains. And it's that local out approach that we're trying to take with this. Amazing. There are so many different groups out here working on this. In Illinois, we're working with University of Illinois, Illinois Farm Bureau, and some other groups that have been working on these sustainability challenges in Illinois for a long time. I would encourage everyone to talk to your extension agents and local Farm Bureau people, because I was fascinated to learn how deep they have gone into food system work, and not around corn and soy and beef, around like actually producing food for communities in Illinois and specifically in this area. So there are so many cool things on the horizon here in Illinois that you wouldn't think are on the horizon. And a lot of them are happening between Chicago and Morrison because of high traffic and higher populations and things like that. So yeah, I would say if anyone is interested in those programs or anything that's happening locally, in like school food programs, whatever it may be, they can reach out. Again, ben@mergeimpact.com. If I didn't throw that one out, just reach out to us and we'll have that conversation. And if there's a project locally you want to get involved in, we will welcome you with open arms into that. Dane County, Madison, Wisconsin area, that is an active project we're launching. We will be at Acres Eco Ag Conference December 3rd and 4th. We will have a booth that shows people kind of the soil to skew story of good things happening on the farm and brands using these products to create cool products. We'll have a baking company, a spirits company, and we'll have one of the beers that we've worked with is the Dogfish Head Grateful Dead collaboration. So we'll have that beer for the social hour at that event. If you really want to learn about eco-agriculture, if you want to see some of the companies involved in eco-ag, that's an amazing conference to go to. It's not too pricey. A lot of farmers, it's the OGs of regen ag, right? Like Gary Zimmer, Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin. You got the whole Understanding Ag crew. You've got if you want to learn, that is such a great place to learn. So we'll be there talking about our program in Dane County and beyond, and that's our next show. We don't go to too many of the industry specific shows like tech summits and things. We go to the ground level action based kind of shows like we love acres. It's a great place to be. So.
Yeah, I've been on the fence on whether I'm coming, but I think you just pushed me over the fence there with your beer selection there. I might have to come down just for that.
It's it'll be a fun time in Madison, and yeah, like I said, acres. I love the environment of acres. They've got new ownership, some couple younger farmers from the area that just have taken a hold of that thing, and really, they're really talented in what they're doing. So I'm going to continue to support them and their mission, and it's very much aligned with everything we talk about today. Like, that is such a great group for what we've talked about today. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you today. Thanks for making some time. I'm looking forward to more conversations in the future as we maybe get into some different projects that we can share with the audience and community. We'll be posting all Ben's links in the bottom of this episode here. And please stay tuned to all the Grow Renaissance podcasts as they come out. We've got 2 different series, the Grow Renaissance, which Will leads. It's more tech focused and related to what's going on at Grow specifically. And then Pasture Prime Time, which is a series where we really dive into what's happening at the farm gate and all the way through the value chain. So stay tuned for the next episode. Ben, thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you for having me.